too. All right, let's get the former coach in here. And first and foremost, with Mark Willard, Larry Krueger, 95.7 The Game, Mike Holmgren joins us. And before we dive deep into two quarterbacks and one locker room, how you doing, Coach? I bet people would love to hear what you're up to.
I'm doing great, guys. Good to talk with you. No, I'm retired. I do a little radio stuff. So I've gone into your world just a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're up here in Seattle, and my grandkids are around, and I get to do a lot of stuff with them I hadn't done for a long time. So, no, life is good.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you think about this? Like, there's a lot of different conversations about, how we got here. What does it say about Trey Lance's development that the 49ers would miss? In general, what are your thoughts about having two large presence guys on one team at the quarterback position?
Well, you guys know that when I was with the 49ers, we had Joe Montana and Steve Young, so it couldn't get any bigger than that.
Right.
But I think, the whole thing is, I think they wanted to go with Trey Lance. You draft someone in the first round, that's going to be you're telling your fans and you're telling everyone, he's going to be the guy. Now, it might take a season, maybe a little bit more in the season to get him ready, like Aaron Rodgers when he was following Favre in Green Bay. But you are making that statement. Now, the thing is, I think what jammed up the works on this thing was when Jimmy got hurt and he had surgery, and so in the off season, people were a little wary, and they also realized the 49ers were in a tough spot because they said they were going to go with Trey Lance. So the trade idea, people just waited out, and now the people who really wanted him and waited it out, now the 49ers pull this one, and it's I think it's a good thing for the outcome of the football team. However, it is a little complicated because what happens when Trey Lance, let's say he starts out the season and he's not playing well, and then what do the fans do? What does the organization do? You run into those types of situations, and that's not good for your football team.
Coach, I'm so glad we're having you on today because I think you're, a perfect guy to talk to. I mean, you coach quarterbacks for years. Steve Young swore by you. Joe Montana the same. I think your credentials are well established. When you see Trey Lance, the player, and you see his throwing mechanics, you see everything about him. Give us your professional evaluation. I mean, I know he's considered to be raw. There's a lot to work on. What do you see when you see him?
Well, that's what I see. I see a young man who's physically very, very talented, but has a ways to go. When you look at, he has not played a lot of football in games, going back to his college days. So there is a learning curve when you come into the league. Now, physically, he'll get out of jams by running. Then you worry about him getting hurt and things like that. But, it's going to take some time for him to hit his stride, I think. But, they got a great coaching staff there. Kyle's as good a quarterback coach as there is. And so they'll get the most out of him. But it's going to be a little hit and miss in the beginning, I think. And then people have to be patient because they're going to get restless because the 49ers do have a good football team.
Coach, there are two huge questions I have about this, and I wonder what your perspective is. Let's start inside the locker room. And Joe and Steve was one very unique thing, and so is this, because it isn't just a good backup quarterback. It's the guy who's been the leader of this team for 5 years. So can you speak to how a locker room handles that? What is it like for the guys if they're totally sure who their leader is?
You know what? It's interesting. I think most guys in the locker room, the players, they rally for the team. That's what their thought is, and that's what the coaches are going to be preaching. Now, if things don't go the way in the beginning, the way they want to, then the tough part is making the decision. Then you sit Trey down and then bring in Jimmy, if he can play physically, if he can play. And then what if that's not going so good or he's a little rusty or whatever? Then it becomes a very, very difficult season. And then you see a little bit more, perhaps, maybe not overtly, but you start picking sides. This is the way we should go, and all of a sudden the players now become smarter than the coach, which is never the case. You guys know
that. It's funny. 1988. I want to go back to 88 because I thought it was an incredible year, and I saw the. I'm not sure if it was in the Joe doc or if it was in the Walsh hour-long breakdown on his career. But you went to Bill and said, "Hey, look, we need to pick a quarterback here." And Bill said, "Okay." And he picked Joe Montana, and the rest is history. The team won in 88. They won in 89, came one win away from a third trip in 90. Did you see a split locker room then, at least split allegiances among the players? And how can a coach avoid that scenario if possible?
No, you know what, to answer, no, I did not see a split in the locker room. What I did see was my career on the line if it didn't work. That was for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill told me as much. Mike, this is okay. We're going to do this, but you know what happens if it doesn't work. So, fortunately, the guys came through and we finished strong. But I don't think it affected the locker room. I really don't. What it did was, and what could happen here, is that the players. Now you got two great Hall of Fame players, Joe Montana and Steve Young, but they, regardless of how good they are, they get a little off balance. All of a sudden, they're not well, and then Bill, in games, he'd substitute the other guy in, so they both played, and that was making them off balance and creating problems for the football team, I thought. And then, of course, we battled out of it and finished very, very strong. But that's the thing. If it's not a problem in the locker room, it's just with those guys. You're talking about two really tough mentally guys, in Montana and Young, but it affected them. And I thought it did, and I coached them, and so I told Bill that. But thank the Lord, it worked.
Yeah, it's obviously a lot. Mike Holmgren is with us here on 95.7 The Game. Coach, Jimmy Garoppolo said it at the end of the last year. He said it was a strange year. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but ... It worked. But now they've signed up for it again. And I guess that's my big question here is that if you sign up for this again, when it was clear that both sides wanted to do it a different way, I take that as at least some level of concern that Trey is not where they wanted him to be on this day. Do you think the 49ers would do this if they didn't have a little bit of concern about Trey?
Well, I think that's fair. I don't know for sure, but I think that's fair. I think more importantly that, when they couldn't trade him and get which I assume the hope was not only to trade him, but to get a quarterback up from the other. Happened after the injury and all that kind of stuff. So the more it went down, I don't think they're going to change who's going to start and all that, but it's a unique situation. I believe they believe in Trey, but he's young, and so they got a good team, and if you want your goal is set this for the Super Bowl, and it's not you're kind of struggling in the beginning because of this and that, and you have Jimmy Garoppolo sitting there. And then once you make that change, if you make the change, then all of a sudden the genie's out of the bottle a little bit. It's tough to go back the other way. And then now you have probably a little situation.
I also look at this as a situation where the 49ers knew that if they decided to waive Jimmy Garoppolo, he could wind up in Seattle playing him twice a year. He could wind up as a backup to Stafford in LA. And maybe dramatically improve the Rams' chances of winning the Super Bowl. But I wanted to hammer down.
That's very true I know it's true about Seattle.
And I just wanted to hammer down as far as what you think is an appropriate amount of time for a raw quarterback who was as inexperienced as Trey was at a North Dakota State, an FCS school, stepping into the NFL. What do you think? Should he be up to speed by now? Kyle's system's very complex. Should it be 2 years? Should it be 3 years? Joe didn't play until 81. He was drafted in 79. Rodgers sat for 3. What do you think is the perfect amount of time for a young, inexperienced quarterback coming out of FCS to sit before you could hand him the starting reins?
Well, I think it could be a little bit longer because of inexperience, but he also has the great athletic ability to get him out of trouble if he makes poor decisions. But I always felt, and I use Favre as the classic example, that if the player who is talented, and my own ego gets into this because I said, I'll help him be the best player he can be, and I'll do that. I'm going to do that. But and every coach thinks that way, I'm sure. And so, but with Favre, as an example, it took, and if you have the same coordinator, maybe in the same offense, because the unfortunate part is some of these guys have to bounce around a little bit with different coaches. But if you get the same, I always thought by year 3, 2 years, you're doing crazy stuff. Maybe he's playing, but you're losing games. You might win, but he's playing, and you see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then by year 3, if you haven't fixed a lot of the errors and a lot of the misunderstandings, then he's probably not the guy. So I thought 2 years of playing, and then you should have what you want in year 3. And then everyone, that was my timetable.
Mike Holmgren with us. Coach, awesome to have your perspective at this time. Real quick, by the way, just because you sort of mentioned it being in Seattle, Larry mentioned that the 49ers might be worried that he'd end up in Seattle, and you said you knew that was true. What about it on the other end? Do you think Seattle had interest in Jimmy Garoppolo on some form? Oh,
I do. Yeah. I do. I think, there have been a lot of changes, and as soon as Russell Wilson left, then, they were trying to figure out how they're going to do this. And Baker Mayfield's name came up, different names came up. But once Mayfield left and went to Carolina, then who's available? I can remember sitting at my desk when we were trying to find the quarterback in Seattle. We eventually got Hasselbeck, but creating lists, draft choices was one, trades were another one, free agents were another one. So, and the list gets narrow for a starting quarterback, and Jimmy was in that. I think, people they're hard on him. There have been hard on him as far from an outsider looking in, but he's a good player. And I know the Seahawks would have been interested.
Great stuff. Hey, Coach, it's great to hear your voice. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, guy, my pleasure. Take care of you now.
Okay.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, you too. Mike Holmgren here, Willard and Larry on 95.7 The Game. That was interesting.
That was
really interesting.
There were several things that he said there that I thought were revealing.
Okay, what stood out?
Well, the last one, that Seattle was most definitely interested. This is a guy who lives up there and has ties to John Schneider and